Okay. Show me.
Hi there guys, welcome back to the Dusty Sheet channel. Thank you very much for tuning in for another video in my series about this radio from Flysky, the Paladin PL18. Brand new radio, and it's quite an impressive radio, I must say. I am not sponsored by Flysky, by the way, but to me this is an industrial feeling and looking radio, and a break from the norm for Flysky, right, which is known for budget. Is that fair to say? Budget radios? I think that's fair to say. This is not a super expensive radio, but it definitely doesn't feel and look like a budget radio. Okay, so in this video, this is actually a follow-up. I recently did a video on this receiver, the FTr16S receiver. And this is a significant receiver in my humble opinion, because it's a very small receiver. And it's meant for multi-rotors or UAVs. You can use it in airplanes if you run a flight controller. And in the past, Flysky receivers for multi-rotors and such were kind of too big. Is that fair to say? I think that's fair to say. This one, as you can tell, is very, very small. However, it is full range, dual antennas, telemetry, all the works. And in my previous video about this receiver, I couldn't get iBus to work. And consequently telemetry, well, actually telemetry kinda worked. In this video, however, I'm gonna show you how to use this receiver in a multi-rotor and use iBus and have telemetry. All the bells and whistles you'd want for a receiver like this and a radio like this. And in case you don't know, the Paladin radio uses a new protocol. So this is an AFHDS3 receiver, which will only work with their new radios, and the other way around as well. The new radios will only work with AFHDS3 receivers. So this one, for instance. Now, it is important to state that in this video I'm going to be using this flight controller, which is a Diatone flight controller, their Mamba F722 S flight controller, an F7 flight controller. Yeah, and why am I using this one? Well, it's at this point it's basically the only flight controller I use. I've used it in a lot of builds so far and it's flawless basically. So yeah, in the rest of this video I'm going to show you how I set up this flight controller to use this receiver and this radio, the Paladin radio. So if you want to be 100% sure that your setup will work, well, maybe you could consider using this flight controller. I am not sponsored by Diatone. I really don't care which flight controller you use. But again, I know that this combination works. For what it's worth, as a matter of fact, let me first show you that it does actually work. I hope you'll be able to see the screen. At the top of the screen you can see both the RX and the TX, and that means that the radio sees the receiver, and the other way around, of course. So that's good. And if we then have a look at our sensors or telemetry, over here, display sensors. We basically have all the sensors that are connected to my flight controller, which is basically nothing. But the flight controller does have a voltage sensor, and at the bottom over here you can see 11.26 volts. And yeah, I'm using a 3S LiPo, which is in storage, so that's approximately correct. And yeah, signal strength 100, the receiver is very close by, it's just off screen. So this all works, and that's very nice. How did I set this up? Okie dokie, we are in Betaflight, and as you can tell, the flight controller isn't connected yet, so let's hook it up to the computer. There you go. COM6 and connect. There we go. So the first thing actually that was the problem in the past was the firmware version I have on the flight controller. So if you have trouble making this setup work, The problem is probably the firmware version on your flight controller. And my flight controller has 4.1.0 on it, which is, at the time I'm shooting this video, is actually a release beta, release candidate version 3, I think. So the problem I had in the past was that the firmware I had on my flight controller, which was 4.05, didn't support AFHDS3, their new protocol, Flysky's new protocol. So if you want to make this work on your flight controller, you need to be running at least 4.06. And I must admit that I haven't tried that version. I went straight to 4.1.0. There's really no reason to stick around. If you are upgrading to any of the new 4.xx firmwares, you might as well upgrade to 4.1.0 at this point in time. The release candidate number 3 is very stable. I'm using it in quite a lot of quadcopters at this moment. Okay, so that's the first step you need to take to make this work, other than connecting the receiver up, of course. Okay, disconnect. You always need to disconnect if you have run the CLI. So the second thing is your ports, of course. And here are my ports. Like I said, I've got the signal hooked up to the S port of my flight controller, which is UART 1. So serial RX is enabled on UART 1. And that's pretty common. That'll probably be the same on your flight controller. And otherwise, if the documentation of your flight controller states that the SBOS port is on a different UART, yeah, you'll have to use a different UART for serial RX, apparently. The second thing is the telemetry. Now that already actually worked in previous firmwares. It's just that the iBus didn't work, right? Telemetry did work, but okay, so I've got that set up on UART 2. Like I mentioned before, it's on T2, transmit 2. And over here it says iBus, telemetry output iBus. And again, I showed you a minute ago that that actually works. Then there's the configuration, and that's very, very simple, of course. You select serial-based receiver, because iBus is a serial protocol, and then you go and select iBus over here instead of SBus. Probably the flight controller will default to SBus, but obviously we need to use iBus. Now, if you remember in my previous video on this receiver, I had to revert back to SBus. Simply because the firmware I had on my flight controller didn't support AFHDS3. I hope that makes sense. So again, I hope this is clear enough, but with the new firmware of Betaflight 4.1.0 in this case, we can now finally use iBus and have telemetry. Okay, let me show you that the receiver actually works as well. So I'm going to power up my transmitter. There we go. Now you will see the voltage pop up over here when I hook up a battery to the flight controller. There we go. So now both my radio and the flight controller and obviously the receivers are powered up. Let's see if any data comes in, and voila! Everything works. Switches, so the aux channels actually work. If you are interested in me doing a video on how to set up a multi-rotor in this radio, so in the Paladin radio, it is pretty simple, but well, let me know. I'll do a video on that. Super duper simple, but maybe you are new to flight controllers or multi-rotors, then yeah. So hit me up a comment down below if you are interested in that. Nevertheless, this works. All my sticks work and my switches, the switches I've set up work, and even RSI is on channel 10, as you can see here, which is nice. So I can set up RSI on channel 10 like so, and that way I can enable RSI in my OSD, so I can always see my signal strength while flying. Very, very nice. Okay, and the last thing I should show you is what the serial protocol setup is like. Get serial. So, in case you are unfamiliar with this, you could simply copy what I have here. That's the simplest way of saying this. Serial provider is iBus. That's pretty simple, right? And serial RX inverted is off. Contrary to FR-SKY receivers, the Flysky receivers do not use an inverted signal. So if this is set to on in your flight controller, you simply have to type in set serial RX, serial RX inverted is off and hit enter, and it'll then say serial in RX inverted set to off, right? And the same goes for serial RX half duplex. You need to make sure that's set to off as well, so you do set serial RX half duplex is off and hit enter, yay! And let me see, that is basically it. Yeah, that's basically it. Those three things. So serial RX provider needs to be iBus. Serial RX inverted, no, it's not inverted. Serial RX half duplex, nah, off. So it's almost the opposite of FR-SKY receivers, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so once you've done that, you hit save. And your flight controller will reset and you'll have a working setup. Just like I have it here. All your channels will show up in the receiver tab, and if the order of these channels is wrong, you probably have this channel map set to the wrong order. You can simply replace this order by whichever your order is. My order is aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder. So it's correct in my case, but if it's the order is different in your radio setup, probably not. This is default for the Flysky radio, the Paladin, so this will probably be what you need to use, AETR. And yeah, again, you can use the RSSI channel, which is default. You don't have to do anything and you'll have an RSSI. And that's everything you need to know to set it up in Betaflight. Alright, I hope this was useful to you. Maybe you have this radio or maybe you are interested in this radio. This is how you set up a multi-rotor receiver on this Paladin radio. So now you know that it's actually possible and it works. In this video I'm not going to be flying for two reasons. Well, it's simply a how-to set the radio and your flight controller up for this system. Second of all, it's raining. Yeah, so what I will do in the future is do a head-to-head between this radio here and this radio over here. The FR-SKY Horus X10S, which has been my go-to radio for the last year. And maybe this Paladin will replace it. I'm not completely sure yet, but I'll do a head-to-head. I have several identical quadcopters and one of them will have this new receiver. The other quadcopters will actually have an R9M receiver, so not a 2.4 GHz receiver. And that'll be an unfair comparison, yes. That's okay. However, I want to see what is the better experience. Both of these radios are for their brands, the high-end radios. Hall effect gimbals, aluminium gimbals, nice color screens and such. So these should be very comparable. But we'll see. I'll fly them back to back and I'll tell you what I think. So that'll be coming up. Apart from that, I'll be doing 2 more videos on this Flysky radio. One in which I'll fly it with airplanes. And I'll show you the setup of that. And I'll do a full review of this radio. That'll be coming up. I again hope this was useful. Catch you on the next video. Bye bye.